All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Ask Philip for October 18, 2024. Today, we are going to be answering three really good questions. All of them are about training. Stay tuned for that a little bit later in the video. If you're watching live, comment hashtag live. If you're watching the replay, comment hashtag replay. And any follow-up questions, comment on the video below so that I can chime in and clarify that for you. As always, we just have a couple announcements. This is the Wits and Weights Facebook community. It is a totally free community. If you're watching this, you may be in the group or you may be watching it on YouTube. And so there's a link to join the group if you want to get questions of yours answered in a live like this, or just be part of a super supportive community of people focused on their health and nutrition. Very positive, very uplifting and supportive, but also actionable. You know, we hold people accountable, which is what you probably want and need when it comes to training and nutrition. Okay, so a couple announcements. First of all, I always like to talk about the podcast, so you're aware of what's out there in case it will help you. Every week we have 3 episodes. This week, the Monday episode was all about motivation, and Holly B, she sent in the question. She's in our group, and I've tagged her a couple times. Maybe I'll tag her in this video. Finding motivation when nothing seems to work. And I go over the 7 types of motivation and also how to determine which one or more of those is appropriate for you to really get going and make progress without relying on discipline and willpower. The second episode this week was about restriction. And it's a little bit of a different angle of, we talked about restrictive diets, and I've used the phrase, getting your fat loss without restrictive dieting. But there is always some element of restriction, and it depends on what you're restricting and whether you're doing it in the way that works for you. So check out that episode. Here's why your diet should be restrictive for fat loss. And again, it may not be what you expect. So dive in and check that out. And then today's episode is an interview with Justin Cottle. He is back on the show. He is awesome. We love nerding out, geeking out. I hope you do as well. He's an anatomy expert, so he knows a lot about what goes on down at the cellular level. But then when we bring it up, it helps us understand why what we're doing in the gym and with our food and with our, sleep actually affect what's going on down at that level to get, to maximize our muscle growth. So check that out. The other quick announcement I posted in the group is, if you're not aware, Wits and Weights Physique University, it's an education and accountability-based coaching program that I have at a group level. So it's group coaching, which is separate from my one-on-one coaching. But what I wanted to point out is that one of the courses, it's called Macrofactor Mastery, is being built out now. So if you want to get in on the ground floor and dive into learn more about how to best use Macrofactor, what it means, how to use it to achieve your goals, you'll see modules in here about expenditure, trend weight. You'll see a bunch of articles that I've linked to that I think are core to the philosophy. And there's a bunch coming out this week on setting goals and updating your macro program, Nutrient Explorer, tracking progress, a whole bunch of things coming up and more as the course gets built out over the next week or two. So if interested in joining anytime, the way to do that is go to physique.witsandweights.com, and then you can click enroll now. So that's all I'm going to say about that. And I want to go ahead and answer the questions today. So every other week, we do these lives to answer your questions. What you do is you post a comment with your question, and all I ask is that you provide as much context as possible. It kind of says the instructions here, be specific with your situation and provide context. And some of these questions are more context heavy than others, so I'm going to do my best. If I can't answer your question, it's probably because I just need more context. So starting at the top, we have Amber. Amber asks, as a 41-year-old woman getting back into training, I used to do a 60-ish minute full body workout 3 times a week, progressively overloading. Now I'm only managing to work out 3 times per week for about 30 minutes lifting weights. I walk daily, get my 10,000 steps, and eat protein first. I can't squat or lunge due to a knee injury. I'm seeing a sports therapist. I used to barbell squat 40 kilograms plus 2 years ago before the knee injury. I stopped training when I went back to work after stopping my maternity leave. What would be your go-to exercises? I miss squatting and lunging. Well, I would too. I would miss squatting as well. I remember when I had my back surgery back in 2021, I couldn't squat for weeks. And then I got back into it. The first thing that comes to mind, Amber, is I encourage you to definitely, as you work with your therapist, to be clear on where you want to be eventually. So, in other words, tell him or her that I want to be squatting again. I care about performance. I care about strength. I'm not like the 95% of your clients who don't work out, who are sedentary. I am an athlete. I'm focused on performance. That's just kind of the take control of your health piece. And if you're already doing that, awesome. Great. So, and if the therapist is totally against you ever squatting again, that's a problem too. Because squatting, like a low bar back squat, for example, is pretty darn knee friendly. Because if you're doing it right, the knee acts as simply a pivot point and there's not very much loading on the knee. Whereas a high bar or a front squat, more vertical oriented squats do put more load on the knee, and those could be a problem. Now, I'm not a physical therapist. I'm not a medical practitioner, so I'm not diagnosing, treating, or giving you a protocol for what to do. What you asked for, though, is let's just say you can't squat or lunge. And I get lunging. Lunging can be hard on the knees as well, which is why I like reverse lunges. Again, maybe that's something you could do. I don't know. Most people, when they have after an injury and they're trying to recover, actually working the tissue and the muscles around that injury, like the knees, in the proper way is what you want to do to prevent the development of scar tissue and to allow yourself to heal and recover. Anyway, to answer your question, the biggest lift that comes to mind for me is a deadlift, right? Straight up deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts, stiff leg deadlifts that, focused on your whole posterior chain, they're pretty darn knee friendly when they're done with proper form. And they also still give you a good bang for your buck with systemic fatigue, systemic load, working your back, working your legs. So I would definitely keep deadlifts in there if you can. Then I would just look at all the fundamental exercises that work different aspects of your leg anatomy. So, hamstring curls, right? Leg curls, for example, yeah. So I'm sorry. Brain fart. So hamstring curls, leg extensions, both of those. Now, leg extensions, you think, well, that involves my knee as well. But they're not weight bearing on the knee. They do involve flexion, right? But ask your therapist. Maybe you already have already, like, what are some exercises you can do? Sometimes they're clueless when it comes to lifting. So one thing that comes to mind is I know a guy, John Patrizzo. He was on the podcast. He's personally worked with me. He's a barbell trainer and physical therapist. I'm sure he'd hop on a Zoom call with you, give you a free consult. He's a great guy and can give you some advice. Even if you don't work with him, he loves word of mouth, even if you don't work with him. Good guy. So let me know if you want his info. But hamstring curls, leg extensions, things like calf raises, and of course, all the upper body stuff. I know you asked, what can you do for your lower body? I'm going to start there, right? Because beyond that, it really is hard to tell unless you know what your limitations are. I would say that if you could do something pain-free, it's probably okay. In other words, if you can do a squat type variant that is pain-free, it's probably okay. And you would just work up from there. If you want, again, I don't want to just bore you with a whole list of exercises. Definitely hit me up with a comment with some more specifics based on what I just said, so we can go to the next step of okay, here's some things you can do. I could also send you, if you want it, my group program, workout programs for the month, which have a whole list of exercise substitutions, and that might inspire you to try different things. So hopefully that helps. And I hope your knee feels better and you're able to get strong and get back to it, because you should be able to eventually get back to squatting before too long. All right. Jenny's question. Jenny, do you only lift heavy for me, every second day to give the body time to rest? And then I commented, can you add some personal context? It was kind of last minute, so totally understand you couldn't get to that in the future, or maybe in response to this video, give me some more context if this answer isn't helpful. So what comes to mind for me when you say, do I only lift heavy every second day? I'm thinking one of two things you're asking. You're either asking, should I lift heavy and then light and then heavy and light? Or if I'm doing primarily heavy lifting, should I take a day off in between? Of course, the question is going to be, it depends heavily on your training age. Are you a novice, intermediate, advanced trainee? It also depends on your sleep and recovery, right? Are you eating plenty of food as opposed to dieting? Are you getting plenty of high quality sleep? And then it depends on your programming. So if you were to lift heavy, what I think of heavy, which is compound lifts, barbell lifts, squats, deadlifts, presses, in the 4 to 6 rep range for a few sets, and you're doing a full body workout, well, yeah, you would skip every other day because you don't want to work the same things twice in a row. If you're doing like a 4-day split, the whole point of a 4-day or 5-day split is to naturally split up the muscle groups, upper, lower, push, pull, legs, so that you do have at least, say, 48 hours of rest between muscle groups, even if you're training back-to-back days. I mean, this is a fundamental aspect of programming that absolutely rest and recovery, you should be thinking about it. And I'm glad you are, Jenny, because that's probably the most important factor for allowing your muscles to grow between sessions. However, some people who are on the newer end of lifting might be resting too long between sessions and not get enough frequency to stimulate them to grow. So let's back it up and talk about principles then. Instead of days and rest periods and all this, what's the principle you're trying to achieve? You're trying to achieve progressive loading. We use the term progressive overload, but I'm getting inspired by Dr. Jordan Feigenbaum, who he's recording today with me. And he likes to use the term progressive loading because we're not overloading, we're just loading. Anyway, if you can, for example, squat on Monday, and then let's say you wait a week and you squat the next Monday, and it's very hard to progress, you may not be training frequently enough because you're a new lifter, for example. And now you should be doing it twice a week or 3 times a week. So if you're not doing it enough to progress, that's a problem. And then on the other hand, if you do it too frequently and you find that you also can't progress, or you feel tired or wiped out, then you may have to spread it out. Does that make sense? So general rule is the newer the lifter you are, the more frequently you can do that, where you can lift the same exact heavy lift practically every other day. And the more advanced you are, that has to spread out. So I hope that answers your question. It's hard to tell exactly what type of question you were asking there. So comment below, Jenny. Please give me some more context, and then I will, I'll give a follow-up comment below the video. Okay, and then the last question today is from Donald. Donald says, and I apologize, guys, I'm always super caffeinated when I do these and continuing to get more caffeinated. So I'm kind of, let's say I'm at my peak of energy right now. Okay, Donald, I am 66 years young. All right, I love the framing on that. I'm trying to build muscle. Is it better to do more reps with a lighter weight or less reps with a heavier weight? I try to work out 3 times a week, and afterwards I do 30 minutes of cardio. All right. And then I replied, can you add some more personal context? Just like with Jenny, and it was kind of last minute. And I linked you to an episode that I did not long ago called the new over 50 roadmap to lifelong strength, health, muscle, and longevity. And the reason I gave you that episode is there's a section in there. I mean, really, the whole thing's relevant for older lifters. But there's a section in there where I talk about how extremely valuable it is for older lifters to lift heavy compound lifts. And I'm like pretty unambiguous about it, only because of the benefit to your central nervous system, at the neuromuscular level, and also to your bone density. Things like that are super important as we get older to function, to movement, to the movement patterns. If you're familiar with something like starting strength, Mark Ripito would talk about all the time. It was one of the ones that inspired me to completely change the way I lift, 5 years ago or so. It's all about movement patterns. Even though you're trying to build muscle, muscle's best built when you're using your system of muscles in concert as they're naturally intended to be used. Squats, presses, hinges, right? Picking things up, deadlifts, pressing vertically and overhead, or horizontally and overhead. And so even though your question's kind of generic, right? When you say lighter weight, less reps with heavy weight, I recommend most people who are getting started or intermediate to be working in the 4 to 6 rep range. I mean, I'm pretty unambiguous about that, just as a foundation. But then you can layer on top of that the more medium rep range, let's say 8 to 12, or even higher than that for accessory and isolation work. Nothing wrong with that either. But I like to start people with, I'll say less reps with heavier weight, just for so many reasons, having to do with getting stronger, having to do with health and hormones, having to do with bone density and function, all the things. If you think, why are you doing this? You're 66. Why are you doing this? You probably want to be walking around and vibrant and fit well into your older age and defy the odds of what seems to be the norm among older folks. Completely change your family tree, change what it means to be an quote unquote old person. In fact, you said you're 66 years young, and I totally agree with that sentiment. So, I mean, regardless of all of this, it's about movement patterns, it's about proper form, and it's about progression. Just like I talked to Jenny, it's about progression. You can progress at lighter weight with more reps. You're going to need a lot more reps, and you're going to have to be super focused on your form and training really close to failure, which is a lot harder to do for people who aren't super skilled at it and have been doing it a long time. So I would have a foundation of heavy compound exercises, squats, bench press, overhead, deadlift, and even rows, for example, pull-ups, chin-ups, things like that. And then throw in some accessories to support those. And if there's time, both number of days per week and minutes per session, yeah, you can add in some extra isolation work for physique development and extra muscle growth beyond that. Okay, so I hope that answers your question as well. Again, if you need more details, throw them in. I know you mentioned, you work out 3 times a week, do 30 minutes of cardio. I'm happy to address anything else related to that if you want to throw it in the chat. Okay, that's it for today for Ask Philip, October 18. Hope you like the video. If you do like it, love it, share it, tell people about our group. You can find it on YouTube as well and share it with folks. Let them know they can come in and get their questions answered. Enjoy the, building strength, enjoy flexible nutrition and the podcast and everything else. Have a great weekend. Talk soon.